So we hit the final act of songwriting, at least what I want to cover, which is writing lyrics. This is the part that's going to get abstract and definitely subjective just because of the nature of the topic. Certainly some personal opinions that you might not agree with or even really care about, but that's just how it goes. You should get ready to jump back into high school English. We're going to see a lot of terminology from poetry class. So lyrics are the most direct part of storytelling. You get to spell out your message for the world to see, and different people have their own way of doing it. Some like to be blunt and straightforward, some people like to be cryptic, some people don't care about lyrics, it's just there as filler for the vocals. Lyrics are the primary focus of my songwriting. To me, a riff is a riff, a solo is a solo. I want to produce great music, but I'm not really concerned with shaking the world as a guitarist. It's very hard to write an original riff these days, and it's my experience that whatever riff you come up independently, someone else out there has already done it. But lyrics are still sort of a neglected side of songwriting in metal, especially in extreme metal. I want to keep lyrics alive in the vein of great songwriters like Ronnie James Dio and Steve Harris. At the end of the day, my lyrics are what I'm proud of the most, and I don't consider a song finished until I think the lyrics are the best that they can be. So what are lyrics anyway? Lyrics are a unique way of telling a story. There aren't a lot of original stories out there to tell. For example, when James Cameron's Avatar is a ripoff of Pocahontas or Dances with Wolves, what a storyteller tries to do is tell their original version of that story. My personal goal as a lyricist is to find the combination of words that tells the story in the best way possible. I do believe that there's one sequence of lyrics out there that sends whatever message you're trying to send better than any other, and my goal is to discover the sequence, like someone digging for treasure. Lyrics are composed into several different components. The first is the literary side and has to do with word choice and how these words can be interpreted. The second is the poetic side, how those words are organized to create effects during lyrical motion, something that I like to refer to as flow. Word choice plays an important part in how lyrics are interpreted. I like my stories to have a bit of depth to them, but I want to create this depth using the simplest words I can find. That way I can send a clear message, but have hidden meanings underneath that are more subtle. I feel like some lyrics confuse complexity for depth, especially in more progressive and experimental styles, where you get really advanced vocabulary, words that you'll never see in common lexicon, like the word lexicon. I prefer the meaning of my lyrics to come from the way the words work together, not from the individual words themselves. I don't believe writing deep lyrics and hunting words in a thesaurus are the same thing. Other times I've encountered lyrics that sound like they're straight gibberish. I've heard it a couple times in indie rock, but that's not my domain, so I can't really be a critic. But you'll get these absolutely cryptic mixtures of words that don't make sense in any sort of context. And then when people say these lyrics are open to interpretation, that's when I have a problem. Both methods I've described just end up substituting confusion and complexity for lyrical depth. Interpretation has little to do with how someone comprehends words. It has everything to do with an individual's perspective. The lyrics you write are going to be personal and based on your own experiences. Something that makes sense to you might not make sense to anyone else. But there are ways you can take a narrow message and broaden it to a greater audience. This is where literary devices like metaphors and analogies come into play. By taking an idea and restating it using more general terms, you can take your personal message and expand it to one that can be more easily interpreted by other individuals. Double meanings, word associations, and all sorts of wordplay are ways you can add depth to your lyrics. Foreshadowing and other great techniques that you remember from English class. Detail and imagery are significant parts for painting pictures using words, which is always a good thing. One of my favorite examples of wordplay in metal is Holy Diver by Dio. There's a pair of lines in the center of the song. In the music video, I think he walks into a forge and then the blacksmith tosses him a sword or something like that. The line is, "Between the velvet lies, there's a truth as hard as steel." There are subtle pieces of wordplay in these lines. The direct meaning is the one where the word velvet is the adjective that modifies the noun lies. Velvet, of course, is synonymous with something being smooth, so the idea here is between the smooth lies, there's a truth as hard as steel. And you have this association between the words lies and truth. But if we interpret velvet as a noun and lies as a verb for something that lies within, then we get another meaning. Between the velvet, which is this soft object, there lies a truth that's as hard as steel. And now we have this association between the words velvet and steel. Of course, Dio is one of my major influences as a lyricist. As a fan of Iron Maiden, I honestly believe that Bruce is actually as good of a lyricist as Steve, and some of my favorite songs are Revelations from Peace of Mind and Coming Home from the Final Frontier, which are both brilliant in terms of imagery. I'm also heavily influenced by Isan, who's my favorite musician, and John Hamm from Agalloch, who especially has the talent for coming up with great titles. But back to the subject of word choice. I like to be as simple as I can when it comes to words. I think my lyrics are straightforward, although I might inject obscure references from time to time. What I hope I'm doing is that I'm adding depth by including subtle meanings, wordplay, metaphors, that sort of stuff. Occasionally I will look through a thesaurus if I'm trying to find better ways of saying the same word, one that fits the poetic structure of the song, like rhyme, but I'll come back to that after I introduce flow. Flow, or the poetic component of lyrics, as I introduced earlier, depends on several different things. This is mainly where the other poetic devices come into play, like alliteration, assonance, and of course rhyming. There's also a rhythmic component, I call this vocal meter, where the words are divided on the beat. Music that flows well sticks to a consistent meter. This is a way to keep the ideas in your song together. One section might have an associated meter. When you move to a new section, it might be different. When you break an established meter, things start to fall apart. One thing I hate is when you hear a vocalist rush to cram more words than can fit in the end of a line, like basically every song by System of a Down. Like I said earlier, I think there's one way to tell a story that's better than the rest, and that definitely includes lyrics that fit in meter. If there are too many syllables, you can just use different words. But the big section I want to talk about here is rhyme. One of my favorite things to do when writing lyrics is finding rhymes. So if you thought I was opinionated before, I'm about to go tenfold here. Rhyme is a significant part of flow, and the most common form of rhyme in music is end rhyme. End rhyme, I believe, is also the most overused and overrated form of rhyme. The problem isn't that people use it. I'd be insulting my own music if that was the case, because most of my lines rhyme at the end. But the biggest problem is the dependence and the over-reliance on the use of end rhyme, which is something that I think can pigeonhole lyricists into forcing lyrics just for the sake of rhyming. I'm talking about words that don't have good context and they don't contribute anything to the song other than existing just to rhyme. There's also too much emphasis, I think, on true rhymes, especially well-known ones like light, bright, night, fight, and might. These are words that have been rhymed endlessly by power metal bands and Kesha. End rhyme's an easy way to restrict your story to predictable and unoriginal lyrics. Instead of a song, you'll end up writing something that sounds like Dr. Seuss. Near rhymes are a way to keep steady flow while allowing for an open choice of words where you can maintain context and hold your ideas together. All it takes is a similar phonetic sound. In my song Wanderer, we have this line, "Lost the key to the gate of dreams, enduring restless nights, seeking release." Those words don't exactly rhyme, but the piece still flows because of the E sound that you have. End rhyme is ideal, but in English there's a restriction on the number of words that actually rhyme. You can get away with a lot more in languages like Spanish or Russian, but English is just too messed up. It's just a scrambled pot of different influences. My main point here is that lyrical context shouldn't be sacrificed for the sake of end rhyme. There are other ways to create flow. Internal rhyme, head rhymes, other complex schemes work just as well. A great example is the chorus to Power Slave by Iron Maiden. "And in my last hour, I'm a slave to the power of death." For a more complex style, the first verse to my song Drifting is based on rhyming at the beginning of a line with the end of the previous line, so you have consecutive rhyming sounds. "At the edge of the world, I behold, as I gaze into the sea, I see my reflection, a projection of my spirit." Occasionally, I like to take it to the extreme and use homonyms, words that sound the same or close to the same, like an obsidian heart, which is styled after drifting, forged in the heart of the crater, the creator looks in dismay. The rest of the verse gets even more complex with its internal rhymes, as well as some double meanings, and this is one of my favorite verses that I've actually written to this date. So with all that said, how do I approach lyrics? I want to tell a story with a clear message, using lyrics with a meaningful level of depth. A personal story that other people can relate to. The lyrics should be well structured in a consistent meter, while also flowing in a smooth manner through the use of complex rhyming. But I never sacrifice context and restrict myself to the use of certain words just for the sake of rhyming. If the rhyme exists, I'll use it, and I'll take the time to hunt for good rhymes. my songs aren't written overnight. There are stages of rewriting and revising. Plenty of songs have been scrapped up and built up from scratch again. But if the rhyme's not there, I'm not going to force anything into the spot. I'm just going to ignore it and hope nobody notices. At the end, the most important thing to me is telling my story in a focused manner. Lyrics is really a tough subject. It's definitely more abstract, and it's the most widely variable thing in songwriting. And I don't expect anyone really to get the point that I'm trying to make until I actually go about breaking down my own songs. Like I've said many times, this is coming out very soon. There are a couple more videos that I want to do on writing lyrics, including a bit on organizing them in structures and some tips for practicing lyrics. After that, I want to cover production, which will coincide around the release of the new album, I think. And then I'll just go through each song from the beginning while I continue to work on new material.